So it looks like we were able to win the die roll here. Sure, let's give this hand a shot. We get to put Leyline of Sanctity into play um, right away, and then we're going to proceed not knowing how good these Rune Halos are going to be or what we're going to name with them. So we've got this Phyrexian Unlife, which we can use. And that's going to be specifically good if we're against an aggressive deck, though our opponent is leading off on Flooded Strand. That doesn't give us a ton of information. But we can still play the Unlife. That Unlife is really only terrible against Infect. Just doesn't do anything. But it looks like we are up against a control deck here. So this is going to be probably a long and drawn out match, most likely. So, sure, let's go ahead and play the Unlife. And that's just going to be another buffer that we have access to. We're still going to... The plan is still to resolve Enduring Ideal. We don't have it yet. We don't have the mana yet. So, we're a ways away from being able to do that. There's a path. So we see a Celestial Colonnade. We can just play a Runed Halo here, naming Celestial Colonnade. Sure. I mean, this blue-white-red deck, it's not going to have that many win conditions. Although it looks like our opponent realizes what we're up to and is going to Spell Snare the Runed Halo. But that's fine. We have backup Runed Halos if we want to cast them. But now with the Spell Snare in the graveyard, we have to be thinking our opponent can go Snapcaster Mage Spell Snare. So maybe we don't even play the Runed Halo at all. However, we drew a Porphyr Notes, which it's not the best in this matchup, but I think now we can play the Runed Halo. If it gets Snapcaster plus Spell Snared, then we can play the nodes, get rid of the Spell Snare. Not the worst situation for us. We also have the Sphere of Safety. If we're able to get it down, that's going to make our opponent's attacks with something like Celestial Colonnade a lot more difficult, just because of all of the mana that's going to be needed to put into those types of attacks. The nodes, though, it's not going to be sticking around for very long. So here we can go ahead, get rid of the Snapcaster, and then we're going to have to sacrifice it. I like going for Runed Halo again, and this may cause our opponent to play another counterspell. Hard to say. If our opponent does not counter it, we can just name Celestial Colonnade. So, yep, just going to name Celestial Colonnade here. And then this is going to allow us to, if we do draw a Nykthos, it's going to mean having this Rune Halo in play is going to be really nice for our Devotion. We've also got this Leyline in play, which our opponent can't target us with these burn spells. So it looks like the Electrolyzes, our opponent's actually just going to target themselves with the Electrolyze. So that's good news. We drew a Ghostly Prison. So just going to cast it. And blue, white, red, one of the main win conditions in this deck is Snapcaster Mage. Another one is Celestial Colonnade. We've seen both those cards. Sometimes there's other ones. Vendilion Click, Restoration Angel come to mind. Sometimes you'll see Geist of Saint Draft. So we're holding on to all of this removal in case our opponent plays additional threats. Alright, here's a Suppression Field. Feel comfortable playing that out now. And it's not going to have a huge impact on the game, but it's another white card to add to the battlefield. Our opponent might. Alright, our opponent does feel the need to spell snare, and we're perfectly fine with that. Just trading resources at this point. And here's a Nykthos Shrine to Nyx. So our opponent has a Tectonic Edge actually in play. So I'm just going to hold this Nykthos in hand. We can play it when we want to use the mana. So Sphere of Safety, it's definitely an option. Now we've drawn a second ley line. So I think we can go ahead and play the Nykthos knowing that it's probably going to be Tectonic Edged. But this is going to give us 6 white to go for the Sphere of Safety. And this ley line we can cast later on. And this is not the type of matchup that you'll usually see in Modern. Alright, there's a mana leak. So that's kind of annoying. So the mana leak, if we had one more mana, we could have paid for it. And now our opponent's probably going to Tech Edge away the Nykthos, but there's good and bads to that. Because we have 3 more Nykthos in our deck. So now if we draw another Nykthos, that they are going to be good. If our opponent chooses to Tech Edge, and our opponent might not choose to Tech Edge the Nykthos, so we'll see. Alright. Looks like the answer is going to be yes, our opponent's going to Tech Edge. So the Mistfield Plains and the Nykthos are going away. So now we're cut down on lands, although we just drew another copy of Nykthos, so that was one of the scenarios that we knew could happen. So a little bit rewarded there. And now there's no reason not to try to double up on ley lines. Our opponent could have stuff like Cryptic Command, try to bounce one, and just having as many of these enchantments in play is nice. We haven't drawn the Enduring Ideal, but basically we're not going to allow our opponents to beat us. So just running the Jeskai deck out of win conditions and methods of beating our deck is the plan. And then we can either deck our opponent out, or we can try to assemble the Enduring Ideal combo. So it looks like the play is going to be a Cryptic Command. Just counter draw. Our opponent could have bounced one of our enchantments, but it looks like the cards in our opponent's hand probably aren't that great right now. And here's a Luminarch Ascension. This is one of our win conditions. So I'm just going to play it out. And I don't really see a huge benefit to waiting on it. We'll see if our opponent does have a counter spell, something like Snapcaster, Cryptic, but it looks like the answer is no. So Luminarch Ascension, every time we don't lose life for the turn, we are going to get a counter at the beginning of our opponent's end step. So they don't deal us damage. We get a counter on the Ascension. And then once we get 4 counters, we can start making 4/4 Angels and win the game that way. So really no rush. Our opponent's now forced to try to do something to disrupt this, and it's going to be pretty hard to do that. Here's a copy of Prison Term. So we've got 4 spot removal spells in play, so even if our opponent does find one of their creatures It's likely not to be that effective unless it's something like a Geist of Saint Traff type of card. All right, this is quite annoying. So our opponent has found engineered explosives for 2. So this can blow up the Luminarch Ascension and the Rune Halo. And the engineered explosives, it's a card that the Jeskai decks sometimes put in their main deck, but a lot of the times they do not. So yeah, it's just gonna, our opponent's just gonna blow up the Ascension and the Rune Halo right now. So that's gonna unlock these Celestial Colonnades so that they're able to attack. The draw here is Heliod, God of the Sun. So we could just run that out. I think I'm fine doing that. And we'll see if our opponent has a counterspell at the ready or not. Okay, it's going to be Remand, so that's only temporary. If our opponent comes in with a Celestial Colonnade, we can attempt to Path to Exile it. But it looks like there are going to be no attacks just yet, which is interesting. So, drew a Temple. We can take a Scry now. Another copy of Nykthos, so we're going to bottom that. And it's interesting that our opponent passed here the turn. That may mean some sort of counter magic for the Heliod. I think we still just jam here. If our opponent just drew something like a Snapcaster Mage, then that will be pretty good. But our opponent... Alright, so... Yeah, Snapcaster Mage was drawn at some point here, so that's going to go after the Cryptic Command. And now our opponent can counter bounce, counter draw. We'll see what the choice is going to be. But the Ghostly Prison, the Ghostly Prison could actually be the card our opponent goes after. We'll see. Well, it looks like just going to be a counter draw. So at least we've gotten through that same Cryptic Command 2 times effectively. The front half and then the back half. But our opponent's just cruising through their deck, drawing a bunch of cards. And here's a Johnny Vengeance. Okay. So that's pretty annoying. It looks like the play is going to be to shut down Nykthos. So I like just trying to get rid of the Snapcaster Mage right now with a Journey to Nowhere. That Ajani is pretty annoying though, because if our opponent's able to get the ley line off the board, then the ultimate can't be used while the ley line is in play. But if the ley line goes away, then our opponent could destroy all of our lands, which would clearly be very bad news. And the issue with the blue-white-red matchup is just all of the counter spells that this deck has access to. Snapcaster Mage essentially is 4 more counter spells plus a creature body. And you don't really know exactly what the Jeskai decks are playing, but we see a Johnny Vengeance here as one of the win conditions. But this activation of Celestial Colonnade, we're just going to go for a path and see if it works, basically. And that makes sense. It looks like our opponent's primary plan is to protect this Ajani Vengeance, and that seems to be working right now. We have not drawn any copies of Enduring Ideal. None, which is a little bit unfortunate. So if our opponent has another Cryptic Command and is able to bounce Leyline of Sanctity and then Ultimate Ajani, that's going to be hard to come back from. Here's a copy of Dovescape. So basically this is... Our opponent's got 20 cards left in their deck, so we're actually going... The mill plan is fully in effect right now. We've got 33 cards, our opponent's got a lot less, but here's the Cryptic Command, so it looks like our opponent has found exactly what they need in order to make a pretty devastating play here. Hard to see exactly how we're going to come back without any lands in play. So yeah, now that the ley line is gone, our opponent can start using cards like Lightning Bolt, and we don't have any lands, so this is not going to end well, most likely. Snapcaster Cryptic, that's a theme of the matchup. And our opponent could actually bounce the Journey, although it looks like going after the Ghostly Prison instead. Here's a Lightning Bolt, that's going after our face. And yeah, we're forced to make a discard here. But not sure that we can actually win the game anymore. Explosives for 3. Yep, that'll send us to game 2. So we didn't draw any copies of Enduring Ideal, but we want to board in cards to help this matchup. So our best plan is still to resolve an Enduring Ideal. So I like boarding in both Seijus. That's going to help us force through Enduring Ideal. And besides that, we can take out a lot of our spot removal, our creature removal. So the Porphyr nodes can come out. Suppression Field. There's a lot of like medium cards, like the Suppression Fields, the Ghostly Prisons. This game is going very long, so we have to be aware of that. So I like boarding in the Nevermore. We can name Cryptic Command with it. I like boarding in Oblivion Ring. We can get rid of a card like Ajani with it. I like the Greater Auramancy. That can help protect our enchantments from something like a Cryptic Command. I like Rest in Peace to stop Snapcaster Mage. And I like Path to Exile more than some of the other removal that we have. So the Ghostly Prisons, our opponent's not really playing a lot of creatures, so I don't think they're very good in this matchup. And then we might actually want Stony Silence as well, because we saw multiple copies of Engineered Explosives. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and shave a bunch of these cards here. So the Phyrexian Unlifes, fine with going down to 1. And then Journey to Nowhere and Prison Term, we can also shave on. So this isn't the best matchup, but we're shaving on a lot of our spot removal. We still got Sphere of Safeties that we can rely on. And I think that actually we still want the Prison Term. Runed Halo's still good. Suppression Field, though. Yeah, maybe we don't want the Suppression Fields. Sure. Kind of some medium cards in the matchup, so let's try this configuration. Couple Ghostly Prisons back in the deck. So let's see what we can do here. I'm going to keep the hand. So we're going to have the option of what we want to Rune Halo once again. So we can Rune Halo the Celestial Colonnades, shut those down like we did last game, but our opponent was able to beat us with other stuff. I'm going to bottom this prison term with the Temple. And the nice thing about the Halo is it does help with Devotion. So for me, the Rune Halo name, it's between Colonnade and Snapcaster, but I like waiting one turn on it. We don't even really mind if our opponent counters it. And our opponent has Spell Snare mana up right now anyways. So I like going for it now because we're going to be able to play Leyline next turn. And we care more about the Leyline. So this time I'm going to try for Snapcaster Mage. See how that works out. Get a Scry here off the Temple. And there's Enduring Ideal. So I want to keep that one on top for sure. And we have to be thinking a lot about engineered explosives because if the game goes long, like the last one, our opponent can just explosives a bunch of enchantments away, potentially. So Leyline, it shuts off Electrolyze, it shuts off Lightning Bolt, it shuts off cards like that. Looks like our opponent's thinking about this one. So we saw conditional counterspells like Mana Leak, and it looks like the Leyline is going to be met with the Mana Leak. So we can't do anything just yet. So our opponent can loot with the Desolate Lighthouse, but it looks like instead the play is going to be to go for a copy of Vendilion Click. And we can Path to Exile this Vendilion Click. So the question is, do we want to do that before our opponent untaps? Yeah, I think I like this play. Just not giving our opponent the opportunity to blow us out with the counterspell. And since our opponent was targeting themselves, we'll see what the choice is going to be in a moment here. The issue is that we don't have the 7 white, and we only have one permanent that's non-land on the battlefield at the moment. So it looks like our opponent chose not to target with the Vendilion Click, so our opponent probably has counterspells in hand, just to be honest. So we're looking for something like Boseiju to force through this Enduring Ideal, otherwise it probably won't resolve. We can try to hardcast the Dovescape, but that's not even necessarily going to be good. It's more of a combo card. Once we get Enduring Ideal going, then we can shut our opponent off of being able to blow us out. So here's a Johnny Vengeance. That's pretty annoying. Phyrexian Unlife. Sure, let's cast that. But this may be the same story as last game. The Jeskai matchup is not what we wanted. Because all of our enchantments are a lot of our cards are targeted towards creatures, and the Jeskai deck isn't trying to win with creatures. So it turns out that doesn't work out so well for us. Greater Auramancy, I would guess our opponent's going to either counter this, or it's going to mean our opponent's going to play an Engineered Explosives. Next turn, because the Explosives, it could get rid of the Runed Halo and the Auramancy in one go. But it looks like the Auramancy is going to resolve, so we really want something like an Oblivion Ring to be able to get rid of the Ajani. The Nykthos being shut down, it's pretty annoying. We do have a second copy that we can use if we want to. But, alright. As predicted, there's the Explosives for 2. So that can blow up Runed Halo and Greater Auramancy. Face Fetters actually does a good Oblivion Ring impression, so we're going to go for it, see if our opponent has a counterspell here, and attempt to face Fetters the Ajani Vengeance. But this is going to cause our opponent to respond. So, yep, there's the Cryptic. Not really surprised, but it's definitely very unfortunate. It looks like our opponent may have looted a Dispel earlier. I didn't catch that. So the Explosives gets cracked. Now it's for Phyrexian Unlife versus a Ajani Vengeant, and we're pretty helpless here. So we can't stop the Ajani Vengeant. Best I can do is try to hit this Desolate Lighthouse that our opponent has with Ghost Quarter and try to somehow mount a comeback. But it's going to be really, really hard if our opponent has any type of threat. And it looks like it's going to be another Ajani and Tectonic Edge. Okay. And I don't think we can win from here. If our opponent has any type of win condition, that's probably going to be enough. So, yeah, just no lands. I'm gonna concede this one. Our opponent's gonna be able to ultimate Ajani again with this new one, and we don't have the lands. It's likely our opponent has more counter magic, and I don't think we have a chance to win.